Donald Trump and his campaign officially announced his stance on abortion. The NAIA College Athletic Association bans transgender athletes from women's sports. Finally, someone gets it right. Biden's still moving forward with his college student loan handout in spite of the Supreme Court knocking down his previous plan. Phoenix PD officer stabbed by suspect at a gas station, yet the left still wants you to believe that officers don't have the right to defend themselves. Welcome to Principled Politics, and today we're going to cut through the commentary. All right, as I mentioned in the intro, Donald Trump has released a statement on Truth Social about his stance on abortion. Now, the Daily Wire reports, Trump releases long-awaited abortion position, says policies should be left to the states. Former President Donald Trump declared on Monday that he supports states being able to decide how to handle abortion policy, following a Supreme Court ruling that overturned Roe v. Wade. Now the presumptive GOP presidential nominee, after his major rivals dropped out and he secured enough delegates to clinch the nomination, Trump announced his position on the contentious issue in a video posted to Truth Social. We actually have that clip, so we're going to play a part of that. And so here it is.
My leadership, the Republican Party will always support the creation of strong, thriving, and healthy American families. We want to make it easier for mothers and families to have babies, not harder. That includes supporting the availability of fertility treatments like IVF in every state in America. Like the overwhelming majority of Americans, including the vast majority of Republicans, conservatives, Christians, and pro-life Americans, I strongly support the availability of IVF for couples who are trying to have a precious baby. What could be more beautiful or better than that? Many people have asked me what my position is on abortion and abortion rights, especially since I was proudly the person responsible for the ending of something that all legal scholars, both sides, wanted and, in fact, demanded be ended. Roe v. Wade. They wanted it ended. It must be remembered that the Democrats are the radical ones on this position because they support abortion up to and even beyond the 9th month. The concept of having an abortion in the later months and even execution after birth, and that's exactly what it is. The baby is born, the baby is executed after birth, is unacceptable, and almost everyone agrees with that. My view is now that we have abortion where everybody wanted it from a legal standpoint, the states will determine by vote or legislation or perhaps both, and whatever they decide must be the law of the land, in this case, the law of the state. Many states will be different. Many will have a different number of weeks, or some will have more conservative than others, and that's what they will be. At the end of the day, this is all about the will of the people. You must follow your heart, or in many cases, your religion or your faith.
Well, there's the clip from Truth Social that Donald Trump posted. And as we can see, Donald Trump is definitely focusing on the primary. He's definitely turning towards the primary with this stance. And a lot of people on the left were outraged. They claimed that Trump was a liar or that he was spreading false news, with the middle part that we showed you guys where Donald Trump made the observation that is correct, that there are some people, and this is, I think, the part where the left can't wrap their mind around it, is the fact that in some cases we do have places like California and other places that have no restrictions on abortion or women's health care, as they like to call it, and they do execute babies. They leave babies out to die. Doctors commit murder where they have a failed abortion, and instead of their medical duty to preserve that life after birth, they decide to let that baby just suffer and die on the medical table. So sorry for the graphic visuals to start the show, but it's something that is important as we look at this. And just on Trump's stance and just approaching this, obviously from a biblical perspective, we know as Christians the moral obligation that we have is to acknowledge life at every stage, to acknowledge life in every form, the potential of life is something that is sacred. Um, in Jeremiah, obviously, if you're a Christian, you've read your Bible, you know what it says. It says, for the Lord knew us in our womb. He's formed us. He's created us in the womb. He knit us together in our mother's innermost parts. And so the moral position, obviously, on this one, from a moral perspective, as we're looking at this as Christians, is obviously this is not where we want the buck to end. This is not the official stance where we want things to stop. From a political perspective, however, when we look at this, obviously this is the smart move, not morally the best thing, but politically, as we see Trump continuing to pick away at the middle and continuing to appeal to independents and to the people who are in the middle and swinging either way, Trump is doing a spectacular job at continuing to hack away at that middle core, as opposed to Biden, who continues to cave to the left and go more and more radical with each and every passing moment. And so with this stance, is it surprising? No, not necessarily, based on previous interviews that Trump has done, previous stances that Trump has given. And, when I think about this, the thing that I've been kind of meditating on and thinking through in my studies over this specific issue is the relationship between abortion and slavery. And I'll get there as I kind of flesh it out for you guys. As we look at this issue, I think it's very interesting that both issues, both things that America has partaken in the form of legislation, in the form of law that allows this to be something that is morally permissible in the country. Slavery was the act of dehumanizing humans, dehumanizing a certain segment of the population for the gain or for the benefit of the other section, which in most cases was a very, very, very slim minority. And we say the same thing here, at least the way I've been perceiving it, is that abortion in its truest form is the dehumanization of the unborn child. It's what they call a clump of cells, a fetus, right? They like to say, oh, the fetus is just a clump of cells. It's not developed. It doesn't have any value outside of, inside of the womb, it has no value. And so when I look at the connection here, I really do believe that this is an issue that won't stop here. It is something that, yes, leave it to the states, but in my heart of hearts and in my true belief, I do believe this is a federal issue. This is an issue that cannot be avoided for much longer. This is an issue that is pressing. This is an issue that needs to get addressed at the federal level. And of course, yes, there are some states that are going to do a wonderful job. Ron DeSantis already with the heartbeat bill, and other governors following, but not all GOP governors. I mean, we have some governors on the right who still want to cave on this issue because they think it's a losing issue. This will never be a losing issue, right? I mean, very clear. The conservative, the moral, and the Christian worldview, the Judeo-Christian worldview is that when we are doing the right thing, when we have that moral obligation, the Lord is on our side. God is on our side in that and through that. And so I wanted to read you guys a quick excerpt from a speech that Abraham Lincoln gave. And I want to draw a comparison here, and I want to look at this with you guys. And so it'll be on your screen. I'll put some of the passages that I'm reading from, but it's the address at Cooper Institute. This was in February of 1860 when Abraham Lincoln was running, not for president yet, but running for the GOP nomination in 1860. And so I want to read a few excerpts from this that I think will draw some comparisons and some similarities that I think all of us can learn from. Here we go. Starting here, it says, "Wrong as we think slavery is," Abraham Lincoln speaking here, "we can yet afford to let it alone where it is, because that much is due to the necessity arising from its actual presence in the nation. But can we, while our votes will prevent it, allow it to spread into national territories, or to overrun us here in these free states? If our sense of duty forbids us, then let us stand by our duty fearlessly and effectively. Let us be diverted by none of those sophistical contrivances wherewith we are so industriously plied and belabored. contrivances such as groping for some middle ground between the right and the wrong, vain as the search for a man who should be neither a living man nor a dead man, such as a policy of don't care on a question about which all true men do care, such as union appeals, beseeching true union men to yield to disunionist, reversing the divine rule and calling not the sinners but the righteous to repentance, such as invocations to Washington, imploring men to unsay what Washington said and to undo what Washington did. Now, this is the part I want us to focus in on here, because this is the conclusion that Lincoln brings the speech to. And I encourage you guys to read the full speech, which, like I said, is titled The Address at Cooper Institute. Neither let us be slandered from our duty by false accusations against us, nor frightened from it by menaces of destruction to the government, nor of dungeons to ourselves. Let us have faith that right makes might, and in that faith, let us to the end dare to do our duty as we understand it. So, the reason I'm reading this to you guys, and I know obviously Lincoln has a lot of lofty words and sophistication in his speech, but the reason I'm bringing this to our attention is because basically the gist, right, the summary of this speech that Lincoln is giving is an anti-slavery speech where he speaks very adamantly about the morals and the grounds on which the abolitionists stand, and the lack of morals and standing that the pro-slavery side has. And so, as he's critiquing the southern states, one of his critiques is that they are so bound in their worldview, they are so enslaved to the guilt and to the wrongdoing that they've partaken in, that the only way that they will be satisfied is by their acknowledgement of their sin, by the acknowledgement that their sin is not actually sin, that it's actually righteous, it's actually a good thing. And the reason the conflict was so tense was because the southern states wanted to enshrine slavery as a national right. They wanted to make slavery something that was nationally good. And so when we see Donald Trump make this stance of, oh, just let the states handle it, let them deal with it, it really does remind me of this issue, because for a long time, that is exactly what we tried to do with slavery. We tried to push it off. We tried to make it a state issue. We tried to make it, oh, each individual state can do whatever they want to whichever one of humans they want to do. They want to treat black people that way, then that's fine. But other states don't have to. And obviously, we see exactly where that issue led. Part here that he says is silence will not be tolerated, saying that silence from the Northerners in their reaction to slavery will not be tolerated. We must place ourselves avowedly with them. And that's exactly, I can't think of a better way to summarize how people who are pro-choice think. They are not okay. Even if we were to, let's say, shut up tomorrow, all the pro-lifers go inside, all the pro-lifers, just mind their business and doesn't say anything, they wouldn't be satisfied. They want complete control. They want complete acknowledgement on a national level. And so for me, when we look at this, it makes no sense that we wouldn't address this at a national level. This is something that can't be avoided. This is something that needs to be addressed at a national level, right? That's like as if Abraham Lincoln came into office and instead of abolishing slavery, he just said, oh, well, let the states choose, let them choose. We clearly know that if that's what Abraham Lincoln was going to do, then yes, slavery would still exist to this day, because some states had that so engraved in the culture and in the way in which they lived that evil was to continue. And I don't hear anybody making that argument. I don't hear anybody complaining that Abraham Lincoln made a national ban on slavery. And so for me, this issue, when Republicans, when GOP people try and make the argument, oh, it's not a winning issue, oh, we're never going to win. If this isn't a winning issue, if this isn't something that we can boldly stand on, I think outside of the transgender movement, this is by far, bar none, the most cut and dry, clear sign of being in the right. This is the most clear issue in which Republicans and Christians and conservatives are in the right. And so, when we just look at this stance, I want us to draw those connections and see those similarities, because every single time we dehumanize a segment of the population, every single time we do that, this is what it leads to. It leads to this division, it leads to this strife. And I hope that we can reflect on the words of Lincoln, in my opinion, the greatest president of our time, the greatest president of the history of the United States. I think that this right here is the stance we should be taking, right? If we are in the right, we have to have faith that right makes might, and that the Lord is on our side. So we'll leave it at that. Obviously, Trump is taking middle of the road on this issue, but this issue can only be kicked down the road. The can only be kicked down the road so far until this becomes an issue that eventually either our grandkids, our great grandkids, or someone is going to have to deal with, or else we're going to turn into a state. We're going to turn into a country, I should say, that just continues to go down and down and down until we're too far gone. And I don't want that to happen. I know you don't want that to happen if you're watching. So let's continue to push for this. Let's continue to make our voices heard. Let's continue to fight back. And let's not be satisfied with state choice on this. Let's be satisfied with the acknowledgement of life, the acknowledgement of liberty, the pursuit of happiness for all at every stage of life and every stage of development. All right, moving on to our next article for the day. Probably my favorite, one that puts a smile on my face, and I think it's a sign of good things to come. NAIA college bans transgender athletes from women's sports. Yes, your ears are working properly. That is actually a headline that we are reading today, and so I'll go through this article. I'll give you all the main points, and then we'll talk about it. National Athletics Association for smaller private colleges and universities around the U.S. adopted a new policy on Monday that bans transgender athletes from women's sports. The National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics, NAIA, is believed to be the first national collegiate athletic governing body to adopt such a policy. NAIA, despite having no knowledge of transgender athletes competing in its postseason to this point, however, all athletes may participate in NAIA-sponsored male sports, regardless of what gender they are assigned at birth. Obviously, just right there, I just want to stop there for a second before I keep going further. That is probably the smart thing, I guess. I mean, I don't necessarily know how much I agree with that. I mean, if you are a woman at birth and you want to put yourself in that position to be at a disadvantage, if you want that, I mean, that's fine, I guess. I mean, based on the way in which they want to do things, I mean, that makes sense. If you want to identify like a male and go and compete against a bunch of grown men and absolutely be embarrassed, then I mean, that's really your choice. I would prefer if we didn't have trans athlete in any category where they weren't assigned to at birth. But I think it is important that we protect the women in this. So we'll continue on. Besides that side note, NAIA oversees around 83,000 student athletes at around 250 schools that are not a part of the NCAA. Its adoption of the policy only applies to NAIA competition. NCAA rules allow transgender athletes to compete if they adhere to the guidelines of their international sports governing bodies. Athletes governed by the organization will only be allowed to compete in women's sports if they were assigned female at birth, according to the new policy adopted by the NAIA's Council of Presidents with a unanimous 20-0 vote. Such athletes can participate in team workouts, practices, and other activities, but not in interscholastic competitions. We are unwavering, and this is Jim Carr, the NAIA's president. We are unwavering in our support of fair competition for our students. And the article goes on, talks about, in recent years, dozens of conservative and state legislators around the country have passed laws banning transgender students from participating in sports consistent with their gender identity. This is the first time this has happened on a college athletic level. So just diving into this, I mean, I think it's still absolutely unacceptable that women have to be surrounded by men in the team workouts and practice and other activities. It makes no sense to me. I mean, if you're just going to do it, just go for it. Just go all in. I don't understand that. But, however, in spite of that, for the most part, I mean, there's a lot of positives in this. It makes a lot of sense just from a perspective of logic and thinking through just the proper thing. I mean, this is exactly this part right here that I'll read once more is exactly how it should be across the board, no matter what, high school, college, middle school, it doesn't matter. All athletes may participate in NAIA sponsored male sports, regardless of what gender they are, sign of birth. And then this part, um, the organization will only allow people to compete in the women's sports if they were assigned female at birth. I mean, that's it. That is the big takeaway from this article and this headline. Only women can compete in women's sports. And it doesn't seem like the NAIA had a hard time defining woman. It's female at birth. Someone with the genitalia of a female at birth. You know, the way the doctor holds a baby and can tell, you know, they look at it and they say, it's a boy, it's a girl. Yeah, that's exactly how the NAIA is going to determine, you know, whether or not someone is able to compete. And I don't even want to hear the nonsense that's going to come out of this. And, oh, they're going to be profiling people and they're going to be, you know, genitalia checking and looking at people. That's nonsense, okay? You're going to tell me right now, I want you to be honest. You're going to tell me that when you see a transgender person, when you see someone who was born a man pretending to be a woman, you can't spot that. I mean, I think if we're all being honest, 99.9999999% of these transgender men who want to be women look ridiculous. They look horrible. And so if you just use your eyeballs, now if you're blind, my apologies, okay? Even then, I really don't think you could be tricked by their voices either. But I'll give you that. If you're at that disadvantage, you can't see. I have some sympathy there for that. But for the most part, us who have good sight and can see, that this is unacceptable. There's no reason why we can't just look and automatically like that tell like that's not a woman. And so obviously this is the smart thing to do. This is exactly what all colleges should be doing. Of course, the NCAA doesn't have the guts. They're gutless. They don't have any courage or any ounce of reason in their brain to come up with this policy, and neither would they. Right? They're too big and too much backlash. And I mean, I attended an NAIA school. You know, a lot of private Christian schools are NAIA. A lot of private Catholic schools are NAIA, and so these smaller private schools, I think it's a great thing that the presidents were able to come to a unanimous decision on this. I definitely hope that as time progresses, that we can be even more strict, even with the training policies, the practice policies, and just getting rid of transgenderism completely. Like everybody staying in their specific lane. But I definitely see this as progress. I definitely think that it makes sense. It's logical, and there's really nothing else to it. I mean, I'm really excited to get online and to watch these videos and to react to these people, you know, outraged by this and having their fits. But that's a good thing. They need to grow up. They need to have a little reality check. And at the end of the day, reality always wins. At the end of the day, no matter how much drugs and garbage and body parts they cut off, at the end of the day, reality will win. So, good news coming out of the NAIA, and this is something that we can celebrate tonight. You can have a good dream about it, and you know, have a good night's sleep, knowing that the NAIA actually has some pretty good presidents that have reason. So let's hope and pray that this continues to spread as the transgender cult continues to diminish. Moving on to our third article for the day. coming from Fox Business. Biden to unveil new student loan handout that could slash debt for millions before Election Day. We'll read a little bit of the article, and then I actually went ahead and got some of the clips from that. I watched the whole press conference. As miserable as that was, I care so much about you guys. I care so much about the audience that I put myself through excruciatingly painful experiences for you. So you can thank me for that. But let's read some of this article. It says, President Biden to unveil yet another student loan handout plan Monday in his ongoing attempt to circumvent the Supreme Court. The court has struck down multiple versions of Biden's plan for a student loan bailout, and 11 Republican-led states filed lawsuits against the version he announced in February. The new Biden plan is expected to affect up to 30 million Americans with seizable portions of their student debt to be slashed before the November election. Biden is scheduled to unveil the plan during a public event in Wisconsin, which he did, and we'll get to that soon. And this kind of focuses on the details of the plan, which are important and which we will also break down here. The plan's central pillar focuses on cutting loans that have exceeded their principal amount due to interest. It would cut up to 20,000% in accrued interest, while borrowers who make less than 120,000 or couples who make less than 240,000 would be allowed to cut all their accrued interest beyond the principal amount. So I just want to stop there for a second and explain this, break it down for you guys who are watching. Basically, what the plan is proposing and what Biden's agenda is here is that people who have neglected their student loans or who have failed to pay off the student loan and continue to accrue interest over an extended amount of period of time, when it says that they've exceeded their principal amount due to interest, that means that the amount of interest they owe on it is more than what the original loan was worth when they originally pulled it out. And so just keep in mind, that means that these loans were obviously an extraordinarily amount in the first place, and they've also neglected it long enough so that they've accrued enough interest to be worth more than what they originally received the loans. And then even this next point, $120,000. So anyone who makes $120,000 or less is eligible for this. That is a lot of people. A lot. I mean, I would say that's probably close to 80%, if not more, of the people who have these loans in the first place. Okay, I know we have this image in our mind that people who get student loans or get a college degree, have, these great $1 million jobs. That's very, very much a lie. That is not the truth. That's not the reality of the situation. Most people who get college loans, this isn't even saying that they finished or that they actually have a degree. This is just saying that they have student debt. You could have pulled out a loan, went, accrued all this interest, and then dropped out and not even have that job that pays because you wasted your time. And then even just the couples who make $240,000. I mean, this is just a ridiculous amount. That is a lot of people who are going to qualify for this loan. The result would see roughly 23 million Americans having their loans cut down to the principal amount. The plan would further cancel debt for borrowers who've held onto their loans for decades without fully paying them off. The forgiveness would apply to any undergraduate debt lasting more than 20 years and any graduate debt lasting more than 25 years. The plan is sure to face legal challenges, which we already are fully aware of. In late March, Kansas Attorney General Chris Kobach led 10 other states in a lawsuit blocking the student loan program Biden launched in February. So that's pretty much the gist of the article. I actually want to show you guys some of these clips and just little snippets that I want to react to from Biden's speech. So we're going to go ahead and play the first one.
And when Kamala and I ran this lead county, we made a commitment to fix our broken student loan system. Because while college degree still is a ticket to the middle class, that ticket's becoming much too expensive. In fact, things are a lot different from when college tuition was more affordable and borrowing for college was repaying those loans was more reasonable. Today, too many Americans, especially young people, are saddled with unsustainable debts in exchange for a college degree. The ability for working and middle-class folks to repay their student loans has become so burdensome that a lot can't repay it for even decades after being in school. And I mean that sincerely. Many of you know that sitting in front of me. Even when they work hard and pay their student loans, their debt increases, not diminishes. Too many people feel the strain and stress, wondering if they're can get married, have their first child, start a family, because even if they get by, they still have this crushing debt. That's not it's not just a drag on them. It's a drag on our local economies. It's a drag on, no, it really is. Today, I'm proud to announce 5 major actions to continue to relieve student debt for more than 30 million Americans since I started my administration. First, my administration will propose a new rule to cancel up to $20,000 in runaway interest for any borrower that owes more now than when they started paying the loan. That's a big difference. And over the coming months, the Department of Education will propose and then implement these plans. And starting this fall, we plan to deliver up to $20,000 in interest relief to over 20 million borrowers and full forgiveness for millions more.
Wow. I just want to start off by saying he looks rough. He looks like he's in some pretty bad shape. I mean, he just started it off. Where am I? I mean, he just began it rambling. But as far as addressing the content and what he said in this first clip, and we're going to keep going and keep going through this and working through what he's saying here. I mean, it just is extremely frustrating how idiotic they think we are. How stupid the Biden administration believes that you are, and how much they think we don't have brains. Just to address his first point, right? To address the beginning of that clip that we showed you there. This lie that many people tell us that a college degree is a ticket to the middle class. It's a ticket to the middle class. It's automatic guarantee. I mean, as many of you have seen, just look at the TikToks, look at the outrage, look at the social media backlash on college degrees and on how effective they are. I mean, just look at how much of a scam people are realizing that this stuff is. It's not a ticket to anywhere. The only thing that a college degree is a ticket to now is a handful of regrettable decisions. Not just talking about college decisions and the idiotic culture it breeds. Horrible hookups, pregnancies, abortions, all these horrible things that people are doing in the college setting, in that environment that just breeds just disgust and that party life. And, it just honestly makes people stupid, dumber. I mean, that's part of the reason why, me and my wife dropped out. We realized that this was just a waste of money, a waste of time. I mean, this is not something worth going into debt for. Now, moving on to the second point of the part that he talks about, how, it's a ticket to the middle class, but that ticket is too expensive. Why is the ticket too expensive? You just look 40, 50, 60 years ago, before the main push to make public education, the Department of Education, public, colleges, public universities, private education, private college education was much more affordable. It was much more reasonable at the time, and it made sense. Someone went to college because they were specializing in something. Someone went to college because they wanted to be a doctor, a lawyer, a scientist, an astrologist, an astronaut, whatever it is. Those things are fields of expertise, things that require, great knowledge and depth in those things. Of course, I don't want someone cutting me open and being my surgeon that just learned on Google or learned from AI. Of course, right? That no one is saying that college is completely useless, but it is useless for some. You do not need a college degree to become a social media marketing manager. You don't need a college degree to become a construction superintendent. I mean, you don't need a college degree for 90% of what college is about now. So we have this lie that's been sold to many, many Americans that, this is the ticket to the middle class. And the reason that ticket, per se, has gotten so expensive is because of government interference. Anytime the government interferes with anything, I mean, literally anything, prices skyrocket. The subsidization of the education system, government loans, government funding, all these things, these universities have been cracked out on government money. And because that year after year, the schools raise the tuition, they raise the prices. Why are they doing that? First off, inflation, which is already a governmental issue, something that we caused through our governmental system. But secondarily, the funds that are flowing in and the way in which these universities know that they can get this money because people have been brainwashed to believe that the only route is for them to go to college. And so they know they could charge this much and nobody's going to outrage. Nobody's going to care because they get these loans without looking at the interest. They get these loans without looking at, the actual price that they're going to be paying 10, 20 years from now when that interest accrues. And so just to lay it all out there, all that this is, what we're seeing right here, is literally just Biden trying to buy votes. He's trying to reach into the government's wallet, which is, keep in mind, our wallet. He's trying to reach into the taxpayer's dollar to buy his votes for this coming November. That is what's happening, and do not be deceived. So we're going to react to another few clips here and just look at some of the other wild and ridiculous things he says, and try your best to not get distracted by how old he looks and how really, really incredibly bad this guy looks. So let's move on to the next clip. We'll play the next one for you right now.
I love people saying, well, why are you so pro-union, pro-labor? A lot of people think you can walk up and say, I want to be an electrician. And you're an electrician. 5 years of apprenticeship. It's like going to college. 5 years. I also want to make, and I've been pushing this, and if I'm reelected, I'm going to push it hard. I'm going to get it done next time, is I want to make community college tuition free. So you won't need loans at all. We're cutting half the cost of going to college. It's about being able to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay. That's what we're doing. We're giving people a chance to make it. Not a guarantee, just a chance to make it. That's why I've never been more optimistic. Yep.
So that is the President of the United States, elected. And, there's just a lot that we got to dissect. From the clips that I showed, I made sure to splice in there, a couple times I recognized him falling off the rocker. He just rumbling, and there was one point in there where I'm not even exaggerating. I literally don't even know what he said. I think it was the part where he said something along the lines of I used my to get them to forgive the loans, and so just a few points on this. Every bone in me cringes, and I just am infuriated every single time he pulls this, I come from the middle class, and I'm for the middle class, and that's his line always. And it's what he leans back on just because he grew up having a dad who had a regular job. And then he's, out of that, and therefore that makes him de facto the face of the middle class. Joe Biden, as corrupt as he is, has some guts saying that he's the face of the middle class. His family has made millions of dollars just off of his political career and off of his, relationship with other governmental entities, and his son, and obviously all you guys probably are familiar with all of the details with that. And so obviously that's just a slap in the face to people who truly are middle class. And, this whole thing, this whole lie, this whole scheme that this is the economic future, this is the growth that we need to push us forward. First off, no one in the Biden administration and Biden himself have no understanding of basic economics. I pulled up some statistics here for you guys, some stats from the wallethub.com. And here's some key stats I want to read out to you as we enter this next part of criticism. As of quarter 4 of 2023, student loan debt had exceeded $1.7 billion. $1.7 billion. Now, as of quarter 4, 2023, the average person with student loan debt, this is average, this isn't the low end, this isn't the high end, this is just the average, is $40,000. $40,000 in debt. The average demographic is 35 to 49, so millennials for the most part. And of course, with no surprise, the state that has the most student loan debt would be California. And so as we look at this, there's just a lot here that I wanted to dig into as well. And here's another statistic as well. As of quarter 3 of 2023, student loan debt in comparison from public school to private school, the public school educational system exceeded the private school tuition debt by 28%. 28%. And this is the education system that Biden is pushing, the public education system, which is the system that is bankrupting these students. It's the one that's robbing these students and taking their money. And so the reason I point out these statistics, the reason I'm going through these things is because Biden made a claim there, and we can do the math ourselves. Biden is looking to forgive 20 million Americans, roughly, even maybe more, right, based on what qualifies. That's just a rough estimate. Let's say 20 to 23 million Americans of $20,000 each. Now, if we do the math, that comes into the ballpark of around $470 billion. $470 billion. And I'm sorry, I misspoke earlier in the segment. As I said, the total student loan debt was $1.7 billion. That was a misspoken. It's actually $1,727 billion. So roughly 1.7 trillion. And so as we look at this, it's just $470 billion. I mean, that's literally cutting out almost a third of the debt that is yet to be paid. That's taking that and putting that back onto the economy and just setting it on fire. That's making everyone else who doesn't have debt, making everyone else, like myself, who doesn't have student loan debt, people who didn't go to college, older people who maybe have already paid off their loans, or people who haven't ever received a student loan, they're the ones that are going to be paying for these people who decided, and this is what blows my mind. The left has this image in their mind where, all these people are victims and they didn't have, free will, and they didn't have functionality over their brains to make the rational decision to take out the $40,000 in debt. That's just stupid. The system is literally using these people. I mean, I will admit there's a lot of people who aren't properly educated on loans. But at the end of the day, at what point do we draw the line? When the founders were creating the Constitution, when they're creating the government, this is by far not what they had in mind in any way, shape, or form. This is not at all what that they imagined would be the role of the government. When you take on debt, that is a personal responsibility. That is something that you take on. This is literally it's ridiculous. This just incentivizes more people. This is literally Biden just caving to the Bernie Sanders side of the caucus, just giving in to Bernie Sanders' policies here. And I mean, I'm beginning to just not even recognize the difference here. The lines are blurred. I mean, who did we elect? Did we elect Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden? So $1.72 trillion of student loan debt across the country, and he's trying to forgive $472 billion, which is, like I said, a little under a third of that total. And to move on to his next point, just to show, how ridiculous and how incompetent this administration is he made a statement there saying that if he gets elected again, and let's pray that's not the case, but if he gets elected again, his plan is to make community college free, public community college free. Currently, I wanted to pull some statistics for you from the Community College Review and thinkimpact.com. As of right now, there are roughly 942 community colleges in the United States. And there are roughly 12.5 million students currently enrolled. The average cost per student in tuition for an in-state student is $5,184. For an out-of-state student, it's $8,800. And so if we're doing the math correctly, if we have 12.4 million times, let's just go somewhere in the middle, $6,000. We are looking at a ballpark estimate of 74. I'm not even making this up. Per student, if the community college is free, it will cost America $74 billion. So now we're getting into the range of almost $500 billion packed onto the economy because of Biden's economic plans. Well, that's Bidenomics. Bidenomics for you, ladies and gentlemen. And then as far as I could go on and on about the idiotic statements this man rambled on for 12 minutes about, but just one more statement I want to work through with you guys. This whole idea that 15 million jobs were made, 15 million jobs have been created. As far as the last statistics show, in 2023, the average growth of the job sector by the Bureau of Labor Statistics was showing that the governmental system was adding 60,000 jobs per month, which was more than double than the previous year in 2022. And so this whole lie, this whole scheme, this Ponzi game that he's playing, saying, "Oh, we're growing the economy, we're creating jobs," all of that, you have to understand. If you're really digging deep and looking at it, yeah, more jobs are being made, but at whose expense? At the taxpayer's expense. Biden has no care for your money. He has no care for our money, for the taxes we pay. He's literally throwing money out the window and trying to buy votes this coming November. And it's, as of right now, clearly not working, as Trump is still doing very well in the polling. Still dominating in most states and most key polls for the first time ever. Trump has never led in a key poll in the primary since 2016. So this is the first time Trump is up in the polls, and yet Biden still thinks that he can buy these votes, and make these economic plans that are completely idiotic. And so as far as the last statement that he made, that will leave this on this note. When the child is looking at their parents and the parents are able to look to them and say, it's going to be okay, we're going to be all right. If you want that to be the case, if you want to be able to look at your child or look at your future children and be able to have comfort in the fact that they are going to be able to buy the necessities, to buy a home, to have those things, this is unacceptable. People need to take responsibility for their loans. They need to take responsibility for the student loans they took out. And Joe Biden can't bail them out. Because if Joe Biden bails them out, then that's the end of our economic system. This Bidenomics, as he likes to call it, all it is you get money, you get free money, it's literally the Oprah Winfrey of economics. Just throwing it out the window. And so I find it disgusting that he can sit there and make comments about parents being able to look at their children and have security. This man offers no security to this country. He offers zero security for our children and our grandchildren. And so when he talks about next time, let's make sure there is no next time for Biden. Let's make this the end of the road so that our grandchildren and our children can actually have an economic opportunity to prosper in our country. let's just leave it there. On to our last segment of the day, and this one is local to me, as me and my family live in Phoenix. Grown up in Arizona my whole life, so this isn't nothing new, but I think it's interesting, and I want to report on it. And so, Phoenix police officer, Fox 10 News Phoenix reports, Phoenix police officer violently attacked and stabbed by a suspect at gas station. And then we'll read the details, and we actually have the news report that we'll play. Phoenix Police Department says its officer initially responded to a gas station to escort an unwanted man from the store. The officer spoke to the man and informed him he was no longer allowed to be on the property. The officer escorted the man towards the exit. The man pulled the knife and violently attacked the officer. Store employees rushed to help the officer and fought to subdue the suspect. Once more officers arrived, they took the suspect into custody, and he was hospitalized for medical issues unrelated to the incident. So basically all that means is that the suspect was so cracked up on drugs that he had to be hospitalized. Obviously, that's the way they'll phrase it, medical issues unrelated to the incident. As for the officer, he was seriously injured, and was stabbed in the neck, but his injuries aren't life-threatening. He hasn't been identified, but has been with the department for about 6 months. The officer's commander says the stab wounds were a couple millimeters away from being life or death. Police Chief Michael Sullivan said, "I'm so grateful that our officer injured last night is stable and recovering in the hospital. This is the second officer who has been violently attacked in a week. I refuse to let this become the norm. It is unacceptable, and the community should be outraged." And we'll continue with the article, but just to make some comments, actually, it happened at a local Quick Trip, 17th Ave in Bell. It's actually a Quick Trip I've been to. And so, funny enough, I mean, I used to work at a Quick Trip not too many years ago. And I mean, this is just normal. This is the everyday occurrence. This is the decline of society. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for that decline. But obviously, like the article states, the suspect had to be hospitalized. And obviously, anyone who has a brain put two to two together. He was clearly hyped up on drugs, clearly had to be hospitalized for, other issues outside of that. And this is, the norm. We have drugs running rampant on the streets of Arizona. We have, being a border state, and we have drugs flowing in with immigration, with cartel. And these gas stations are just a hub for homeless people. I mean, they're just an absolute just stomping ground. And when I worked there, I mean, we had armed security, not a police officer, but we had an armed security there that, at times had a rifle, double handgun, full belt of ammo. I mean, that is how degraded our society has gotten, to the point where we need fully loaded security guards to guard a basic Quick Trip. So we'll go ahead and play the news report, and we'll give a reaction, and then we'll close with some final statements for this show today.
I need more units for the trespassers.
I need more units, officers, staff.
For the second time in 8 days, a Phoenix police officer almost killed while on the job.
And they had the whole side of 17th Avenue blocked off all around QT. And I'm like, man, what happened? I heard a police officer got stabbed.
Joseph Donaldson lives next to the Quick Trip near 17th Avenue and Bell Road in North Phoenix. Police say they were called there around 1 a.m. on Sunday to help get a man out of the store employees say was causing trouble.
This was a priority 3, more than likely, trespassing call. We go to these calls all day, every day. And like we've said many times, there's no such thing as a routine call. You never know how something is going to turn out. This was definitely not expected.
As the officer was escorting the suspect out of the store, police say he pulled a knife and stabbed the officer twice in the neck.
Within a couple millimeters, one way or another, this could have been a tragedy for the Phoenix Police Department.
After the officer was stabbed, a security guard and other employees at Quick Trip quickly jumped on the suspect until backup could arrive.
Without the actions of the security guard and those 2 other employees at the QT, this could have continued to be a very bad situation for the officer as well as the community.
The officer who was stabbed has been full-time with Phoenix PD for 6 months. but served as a reserve officer with the department before that.
I just hope that, I hope I never see nothing like that. The police, they are there for us. They help us.
This should not become the norm. The community should be outraged. This is unacceptable behavior towards our law enforcement officers.
So there's the clip, the news report, and just a few key points that I think we need to make here. And the reason I bring it up, obviously, like the article stated and the news report talks about, this is becoming a norm. This is becoming something that's normal. This is something that is happening very consistently, and it's this violent, behavior, this violent outlash towards the police officers and towards our sworn officers. And, this really makes you reflect on the fact that, it's been reported as well in Arizona, and not just Arizona, but just across the country. There's a lot of counties, a lot of cities, a lot of states that are really, really struggling with recruiting numbers, that are really struggling to drive in new recruits and to bring people in that want to step up to the plate to be officers. And this officer has only been with the department for 6 months. And then that just goes to show something. I mean, after 6 months, if you're a rookie, you join and you go through the training, 6 months in, this could be your fate. This could be your reality, being stabbed twice, a couple millimeters away from life or death. Now, as far as the suspect goes, I think it should go without saying that he is very, 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 very lucky to be alive. It's actually very heartbreaking, the fact that he is alive. Any scum who's willing to try and kill one of our officers, to stab an officer and to take his life away, deserves to have his life taken away, even if he was successful in that attempt to kill one of our officers. I mean, it's very clear that the death penalty is suited for this kind of crime. Unrelated to his drug habits or not, I mean, this behavior needs to be punished. And we have these repeat offenders and these people, who are put back on the street, who have, misdemeanors, who have different crimes. I mean, this just doesn't happen here. It happens all across the country. And I'm not saying that this specific suspect, if more information is given about him and we learn more about him, but there are suspects, there are people, all across the country who are drug addicts, who've been caught with drugs, who are homeless, who've committed crimes, who, these jurisdictions don't deem worthy to put behind bars forever. These people need to be taken off the street. They need the streets need to be cleansed. We need to cleanse our streets and have mental institutions, have institutions for these drug-riddled, homeless people. Phoenix, if you don't know this, is famous for homeless encampments. We literally have Tent City downtown, for crying out loud. And so it's very unfortunate. We are extremely grateful, and our hearts go out to the officer involved who wasn't identified, but prayers for his family and prayers for a speedy recovery. And we need to rally behind our officers. We need to support them through this. We need to pass legislation. We need to make it easier for them to do their jobs. And, I'm not saying that this specific instance has anything to do with this, but we see this time and time again throughout our law enforcement agencies throughout the country, where we are jeopardizing and putting our law enforcement in danger through the policies and through the restrictions and the shackles that we place on them, as far as the physical aspect of the job, and allowing the officers to do what they need to do to apprehend these people, to take the means necessary to get these criminals down on the ground, to put them in a place where they're not going to be of any harm. And, all this stems back to BLM, all this stems back to police reform and everything. And so we seriously need to unshackle our officers and give them better opportunities to thrive in these environments. And so, when we look at this from the perspective of the left and the way in which they treat the officers, the way in which their policy and legislation goes against these officers, officers are afraid to do their job. Nobody wants to be the next Derek Chauvin. Nobody wants to be the next officer who goes to jail for 15, 16 years or the rest of their life because they were trying to protect themselves, because they were trying to do what was necessary to apprehend a suspect. And so I pray that change can happen. I believe that we should be fighting for change for our officers. We should be fighting for a better culture, a better environment for them to work in, and more respect for our officers. And so as we close here on this, my prayer is that us as a country, as a state, as states, that we can continue to learn from our mistakes, which is something I know that I say with a doubtful heart, because we don't learn from our mistakes. We see time and time again officers being hurt, mistakes being made, and policies affecting our community and hurting people, including our officers, and not just our officers, but God forbid. I mean, we had QT employees, we had the security guard, other people in the store, customers who could have been seriously harmed in this. And this all stems back to the agencies and the legislation that we have as a state and as a country. We need to be more adamant about cleaning up the streets, more adamant about making a safer place for the future of our children, the future of our families, and for our officers and for law enforcement. Well, thanks for watching or listening. You can find us at principled-politics.com, and that'll do it for our show today. And remember, stay principled.